The sky above Hydra Prime split open like a wound in reality. Crimson light poured across the night, and from that rift came something no Imperial citizen had ever seen before. At first it looked like a meteor, but then it slowed, changed course, and descended with purpose. Billions watched in fear. Defense platforms armed their weapons. The governor himself stood on his balcony, staring through magnoculars as a figure appeared in the sky. A man, or something like one, broad-shouldered, cloaked in red, a strange symbol blazing across his chest, his voice carried without vox or machine. "Your world faces grave danger. I am Kal-El. I come to help." And as if summoned by his warning, the void screamed again. A Tyranid fleet had entered the system. Governor Talius felt the marble beneath his boots tremble as warning sirens howled across Hydra Prime. Astropaths screamed of turbulence in the warp. Tactical displays confirmed what everyone feared. This was no natural phenomenon. A Tyranid fleet had pierced into real space, its bioships advancing with the hunger of a swarm that never stops. Already, spores were burning through atmosphere, streaking toward the cities below. Initial projections were merciless. 30 million dead within hours if the swarm reached the surface. But then the stranger moved. Faster than any fighter craft, he streaked into the upper atmosphere, intercepting the first wave. With fists that detonated spores mid-air and eyes that unleashed burning lances of energy, he erased the initial assault before it could touch the ground. The governor and his council watched in silence. What should have required the full might of the Imperial Navy was done by one being alone. And as the smoke cleared, the question no one dared speak grew louder. What was he? Section 2. The man who defied physics. Hydra Prime streets filled with terrified citizens staring skyward. Vox recordings replayed the same impossible images. A lone figure moving through the void without a void suit, crushing Tyranid organisms with his bare hands, and shrugging off spore blasts that melted armored vehicles. To the common people, he was a savior. Some even fell to their knees, calling him an angel of the Emperor. Children clutched hollow screens, replaying his arrival in wide-eyed wonder. But in the command spire, the mood was different. The governor's generals whispered of sorcery. The Adeptus Mechanicus priests catalogued every motion, unable to reconcile it with known physics. And when word reached the Ordo Hereticus, a single phrase echoed through their encrypted channels. Possible Xenos masquerade. The man called Kal-El landed before the palace gates, cape-torn and streaked with alien ichor. He bowed, unarmed, and spoke with calm certainty. "I seek no throne, no worship, only the chance to stand against the swarm that threatens you." For a moment, silence reigned. Then the spire shook again. The Tyranid hive ships had begun their descent. The swarm came like a living storm. Hive ships rained biopods through the clouds, each bursting open to unleash rivers of chitin and claws. Hydra Prime's orbital defenses spat lances of plasma and macro cannon fire. But for every organism that burned, a dozen more fell. Into that chaos soared Kal-El. He was faster than gunships, striking through the clouds with fists that shattered carapaces and heat vision that carved burning lines through the sky. Soldiers on the walls watched in disbelief as one man stemmed the tide where entire regiments would have faltered. But the swarm adapted. Winged Tyranid warriors adjusted their flight to surround him. A monstrous hive tyrant, its wings blotting out the stars, dove straight toward him. The clash shook the heavens, claws against unbreakable skin, bioplasma against a chest that would not yield. For the first time, Kal-El was driven back. He staggered, blood flashing across his lip. He could bleed. He could be hurt. From the ground, the people cheered his defiance. But in the shadows of the command chamber, an inquisitorial agent spoke into her vox bead. No man should hold such power. If he survives this day, he may be the greater threat. The hive tyrant slammed Kal-El into the spires of Hydra Prime's hive city, glass and steel exploding around them. The beast screeched, its talons digging into his shoulders, trying to tear him apart as lesser creatures swarmed to finish the kill. For a moment it seemed the savior would fall. The people watching from below held their breath. Even the battle-hardened soldiers whispered prayers to the Emperor. Then with a roar that cracked the air, Kal-El broke free. He seized the hive tyrant by its throat and hurled it into the upper atmosphere. The sky flared red as he chased it upward, fists hammering with the force of artillery. When the creature finally crashed back to the surface, it was a broken husk. And yet, the swarm didn't falter. It shifted, adapted, as if the hive mind itself was studying him. Millions more creatures poured from the sky, their screeches echoing across the planet. The victory was only temporary, but for Hydra Prime, hope had been reborn. Soldiers rallied. Civilians who once cowered in shelters rose to fight with whatever weapons they could find. Kal-El's presence was more than strength. It was inspiration. Still, far above in the orbital command spire, the Inquisition's verdict grew colder. A man stronger than the Emperor's chosen. To them, the hive tyrant was not the only enemy Hydra Prime faced. In the heart of the orbital command spire, silence hung heavier than the battlefield smoke below. Inquisitor Vara watched the feeds of Kal-El tearing through the Tyranids, and her jaw tightened. To the common man, he was a miracle. To her, he was a heresy wrapped in flesh. Strength beyond Astartes, resistance beyond any Primarch seed. Tell me, she asked her acolytes, what happens when such a being decides the Imperium no longer deserves his mercy? Reports poured in from the front lines. Wherever Kal-El fought, the tide turned. Regiments that should have been slaughtered survived. Entire districts still stood because of him. But with every victory, the people's cries grew louder. They no longer prayed to the Emperor. They whispered his name. That was the moment the Inquisition decided. Win or lose, Hydra Prime could not be left in his hands. The order was sent in ciphered cant across the system. Prepare exterminatus protocols. If Kal-El survives, the planet dies with him. Down below, Kal-El didn't know. He fought with everything he had, believing the Imperium stood with him. But in truth, the trigger for the planet's death now rested in the hands of the very people he had sworn to save. The skies of Hydra Prime burned as the swarm descended in numbers beyond counting. Entire hive fleets coiled around the planet, blotting out the stars. On the ground, the Imperial Guard broke formation, overwhelmed by sheer mass. Cities crumbled under living avalanches of teeth and claws, and then, through the chaos, Kal-El rose again. His cape was in tatters, his armor scorched, his skin split with wounds that would have ended any mortal. But still he fought. He tore open the bellies of bio-titans with his bare hands. He burned through hive ships with heat vision bright enough to sear the heavens. Every blow was a defiance of inevitability. At the center of it all, the hive mind itself focused. From the swarm emerged a beast unlike the others, an apex monstrosity bred for one purpose: to break him. It struck with psychic fury, its claws moving faster than eyes could track. For long minutes, the world held its breath as godlike strength clashed with alien perfection. At last, with a scream that shook every spire, Kal-El lifted the beast into the sky and split it apart with a thunderclap. The swarm faltered. Without its will made flesh, the Tyranids scattered, retreating into the void. Hydra Prime was saved. The people roared his name. Soldiers dropped their weapons, kneeling not to the Emperor, but to him. And in the high spire above, Inquisitor Vara closed her eyes. "Now," she whispered. Her hand hovered over the rune that would doom the planet. Kal-El descended to the surface, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. The people surged toward him, desperate to touch the savior who had done what entire chapters of Astartes could not. Children reached out. Veterans bowed their heads. For the first time in centuries, Hydra Prime felt hope. That was when the sky darkened again, this time not from Tyranids, but from fire. Massive cyclonic torpedoes streaked down from orbit, the weapons of Exterminatus. Kal-El's head snapped upward. He could hear the screams of the people around him, but above all else, he could hear the voice of the Inquisitor, broadcast across every channel. "Citizens of Hydra Prime, your world harbored a heresy greater than the swarm. It is condemned. The Emperor protects." The cheering turned to terror. Mothers clutched their children. Soldiers who had just survived the impossible now realized their doom came not from aliens, but from their own Imperium. Kal-El's eyes burned. Betrayal cut deeper than the Tyranid claws ever had. He launched into the sky, faster than the eye could follow, intercepting the falling torpedoes. One after another, he caught them, forcing his body against the impossible pressure, shoving them back into the void. The atmosphere lit with fire as he burned himself against weapons meant to end a world. He saved Hydra Prime a second time, but now every soul on the planet knew the truth. The Imperium wanted their savior dead more than it wanted them alive. When the fire finally faded, Hydra Prime still stood. The swarm was gone, the torpedoes destroyed, and the people alive. But their savior hovered in the skies, burned, battered, yet unbroken. On the ground, silence stretched across the world. Every citizen knew what had just happened. The Imperium had tried to erase them, and only he had stopped it. Kal-El landed slowly, his cape nothing but charred strands, his hands scorched from catching the torpedoes. The people didn't cheer this time. They simply stared, torn between awe and fear. He looked to the heavens, where the Inquisition's fleet lingered. His eyes narrowed. They had marked him as a threat, and perhaps they were right. Whispers spread like wildfire across the hive cities, not of the Emperor, but of the one who had stood against the Imperium itself. A name carried in every shadow, every prayer, every frightened voice. Kal-El. And in that moment, Hydra Prime was no longer just a planet that had survived the swarm. It became the birthplace of a question the Imperium feared most. What if mankind found a savior outside the Emperor's light?